Some people survive wars, waterfalls, assassins, and death row, then get killed by an orange peel, a scarf, or a cow falling through the roof. Yes, that actually happened. Today, we are diving into the unluckiest deaths in history. A man who survived Niagara Falls but lost to fruit waste, a playwright killed by a flying tortoise, and a pool party packed with lifeguards that somehow ended in a drowning. These are crazy historical facts, pure, weird history, and proof that the universe has a truly sick sense of humor. And the craziest part? One wrong turn did not just kill 2 people. It helped trigger World War I. So let's look at the people who escaped the impossible only to be defeated by something unbelievably stupid. Let's begin with a party that had one job: celebrate the fact that nobody had drowned. In New Orleans, more than 200 people gathered at a swimming pool after an entire season without a single drowning. More than 100 guests were certified lifeguards, and 4 lifeguards were actively watching the pool. This was basically the Avengers of water safety. But when the party ended, someone spotted the body of Jerome Moody at the bottom of the deep end. He had apparently been there for hours. More than 100 lifeguards, 4 people on duty, and somehow nobody noticed the actual drowning happening during the no drowning celebration. That is not just bad luck. That is the universe writing a joke and refusing to use a subtle punchline. Next came François Vatel, the man responsible for organizing a massive royal feast for King Louis XIV. Around 3,000 guests were expected, because apparently French royalty could not eat lunch without inviting the population of a small town. Vatel had barely slept while preparing everything. Then the problems began. More guests arrived than expected, some tables ran short on roast meat, and fog ruined the fireworks. Then came Friday, when Catholic custom required fish. At 4 in the morning, Vatel checked the delivery and found only 2 small shipments. He asked one supplier if that was everything. Unfortunately, the supplier meant, "That is everything from me." Vatel heard, "There are no more fish anywhere in France. Your career is dead. The king hates you. Good luck." Convinced the feast was ruined, Vatel returned to his room and killed himself with his sword. Minutes later, fish deliveries began arriving from ports across the region. There was more than enough fish for everyone except Vatel, who had just made the most permanent response possible to a temporary seafood delay. These are the kind of crazy historical facts that make modern workplace stress look almost reasonable. Then there was Frank Hayes, a stable hand who dreamed of becoming a jockey. When he finally got a chance to race a horse named Sweet Kiss, he had one problem: he was too heavy. So Hayes lost more than 10 pounds in one day by jogging, barely eating, and refusing water. Basically, he prepared for the biggest moment of his life by turning himself into a dehydrated breadstick. Sweet Kiss was a 20-to-1 long shot, but the horse surged ahead and crossed the finish line first. Hayes stayed in the saddle the entire time. Unfortunately, he was dead. He had suffered a heart attack during the race, but his body remained on the horse long enough to win. It was his first race, his only race, and technically a perfect undefeated career. Welcome to Weird History, where even victory comes with paperwork for the coroner. Opera singer Richard Versailles had an equally dramatic exit. During a performance at the Metropolitan Opera, he stood near the top of a ladder and sang the line, "You can only live so long." Then he suffered a heart attack, fell from the ladder, and died. The audience initially thought it was part of the show. That is either terrible luck or the most aggressive commitment to a lyric in opera history. But perhaps the cruelest case involved Fagiliu Mukametsianov. Doctors declared her dead after a heart attack. 2 days later, during her funeral, she opened her eyes inside the coffin. She saw grieving relatives standing around her and began screaming. The shock triggered another heart attack. This one actually killed her. She survived being declared dead, only to be frightened to death by the customer experience of her own funeral. Finally, Troy Leon Gregg escaped from death row just 2 days before his scheduled execution. He and 3 inmates cut through prison bars, disguised themselves as guards, lied their way past real guards, and drove away. It was an almost flawless escape. Hours later, Gregg entered a bar, got into a fight, and was beaten to death. He defeated death row, prison security, and the state of Georgia. Then he lost to happy hour. And yes, that actually happened. Now we move from people who died while winning to people defeated by objects that should never appear on a list of lethal weapons. Isadora Duncan was one of the most famous dancers of her era. She performed barefoot in flowing dresses and long silk scarves, because apparently stage safety was less important than looking dramatic in the wind. In September of 1927, Duncan climbed into an open-top sports car in Nice, France. A friend suggested that she wear a cape because the evening was cold, but Duncan chose one of her signature scarves instead. The scarf hung over the side of the car, caught in the spokes of the rear wheel, and tightened around her neck as the vehicle moved forward. It pulled her from the passenger seat and killed her almost instantly. Fashion usually murders your wallet. Duncan's fashion skipped the middleman. Her friend had offered her a cape, but she refused. Somewhere, Batman quietly nodded and whispered, "This is why we take costume design seriously." Then there was Bobby Leach, a man who climbed into a steel barrel and went over Niagara Falls in 1911. The drop was around 167 feet. He survived with broken kneecaps, a fractured jaw, and enough injuries to make every bone in his body file a complaint. After recovering, he spent years touring the world and telling people how he had conquered one of the most violent waterfalls on Earth. Then, while visiting New Zealand in 1926, he slipped on an orange peel, broke his leg, developed an infection, and died. Niagara Falls threw millions of gallons of water at him and failed. A piece of biodegradable lunch waste finished the job. These are the crazy historical facts that remind us nature does not always need a volcano. Sometimes it just needs somebody careless with fruit. The Greek playwright Aeschylus received a prophecy that he would be killed by a falling object. He took the warning seriously and spent much of his time outdoors, far away from buildings, rooftops, and anything else that might collapse. It was a smart plan, assuming gravity only operated near architecture. Around 455 years before Christ, Aeschylus was walking through an open field in Sicily when an eagle flew overhead carrying a tortoise. Eagles sometimes drop tortoises onto rocks to crack open their shells. Unfortunately, the bird apparently mistook Aeschylus's bald head for a convenient stone and released the tortoise directly above him. The impact killed him. He successfully avoided every dangerous roof in Sicily, but forgot that the sky had unrestricted airspace. The father of tragedy being killed by a flying tortoise is so painfully appropriate that even a modern screenwriter would be told to make it less obvious. Odin von Horvath escaped Vienna after Nazi Germany took control of Austria and banned his work. He traveled through Budapest and eventually reached Paris. Horvath had always feared thunderstorms, and shortly before his death, he told a friend that there were worse things than Nazis, including strange dangers people feared without understanding why. In June of 1938, a storm rolled over Paris while Horvath was walking near the Champs-Élysées. He took shelter beneath a chestnut tree. Lightning struck nearby. A heavy branch broke loose, and it fell directly onto him. He escaped fascism only to be assassinated by French landscaping. That is, weird history in its purest form. Survive one of the darkest political movements in Europe, then lose an argument with a tree. Samuel Wardell faced a more domestic enemy, waking up for work. Wardell was a lamplighter in New York during the 1880s, and he was such a heavy sleeper that ordinary alarm clocks could not wake him. So he built his own system. He connected an alarm clock to a shelf above his bed and placed a 10-pound rock on top. When the alarm sounded, the shelf tipped and the rock crashed onto the floor, creating enough noise to wake him. This was less an alarm clock and more a daily assassination attempt with a morning setting. The system worked until Christmas Eve of 1885, when Wardell moved his furniture during a party. He later went to sleep without realizing that his bed was now directly beneath the shelf. At 5 in the morning, the alarm activated. The rock did not hit the floor. Wardell died from his injuries several days later. His invention worked perfectly. It woke everyone except the man it killed. Finally, Archduchess Matilde of Austria was preparing for a night at the theater in 1867 when she secretly lit a cigarette. Her father had forbidden her from smoking, so when she heard him approaching, she hid the burning cigarette behind her back. The flame touched her highly flammable gauze dress, which caught fire almost immediately. She suffered severe burns and died 16 days later. Matilda tried to hide one cigarette and accidentally became the cigarette. Public health campaigns say smoking can shorten your life. Matilda discovered the express delivery option. A scarf, an orange peel, a tortoise, a tree branch, an alarm clock, and one badly hidden cigarette. That actually happened, proving that history's most dangerous weapon was sometimes just terrible timing combined with an object nobody thought needed a warning label. Some deaths come from war, disease, or dangerous work. Others begin with a poodle chasing a tennis ball. In October of 1988, a poodle named Cachi fell from a 13th floor balcony in Buenos Aires and landed on 75-year-old Marta Espina. Both died on impact. A crowd gathered because humans see a terrible accident and immediately think, I should stand closer. 46-year-old Edith Sola stepped into the street for a better look and was hit by a bus. Then, a man who had witnessed both deaths suffered a heart attack and died on the way to the hospital. One tennis ball had now produced a higher body count than some action movies. Somewhere on the sidewalk, that ball was probably sitting there like, I have never met these people. Our next disaster began with an assassination plot that had already failed. In June of 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were visiting Sarajevo when Serbian nationalists tried to kill them. One attacker threw a bomb, but it bounced off the Archduke's car and exploded beneath another vehicle. The royal convoy escaped, and the assassins scattered. Mission failed. Everyone go home. Ferdinand later decided to visit an injured officer at the hospital. His driver took a wrong turn and stopped the car to reverse. Unfortunately, he stopped directly in front of Gavrilo Princip, one of the assassins who had missed his chance earlier. Princip pulled out a pistol and shot Ferdinand and Sophie. Both died shortly afterward. 5 weeks later, World War I began. This may be the most expensive failure to ask for directions in human history. Millions of people eventually died because one driver basically said, I am pretty sure the hospital is down here. These are not just crazy historical facts. This was a navigation mistake with artillery. In Brazil, João Maria de Souza was sleeping beside his wife when a cow decided to enter the bedroom from above. Their house stood at the bottom of a steep hill where cattle wandered freely. One night, a cow weighing around 1 ton climbed onto the roof. The roof collapsed, and the animal fell directly onto João's side of the bed. His wife survived. The cow survived. João suffered internal injuries and died the next day. Somehow, the homeowner had the lowest survival rate in his own bedroom. Even stranger, this was reportedly the third cow to fall through a roof in that area. After the second one, somebody probably should have installed a sign reading, "Please keep livestock off the building." Antoni Gaudí suffered a quieter but equally cruel fate. In June of 1926, the famous architect was struck by a tram while crossing a street in Barcelona. His clothes were worn, his appearance was untidy, and he carried no identification. People assumed he was a homeless beggar. Several taxi drivers refused to take him to the hospital, and he was eventually brought to a charity ward. It was not until the next day that someone recognized him as the designer of the Sagrada Familia and one of Barcelona's most famous citizens. By then, it was too late. Gaudí died 3 days after the accident. Barcelona recognized his buildings faster than it recognized the man who designed them. That is, weird history, with an architectural level of irony. Back in medieval Paris, Prince Philip of France was riding through the streets when a pig ran out from a pile of waste and charged between his horse's legs. The horse tripped. Philip was thrown forward, and he suffered fatal injuries. He was only 15 years old and had already been crowned alongside his father, King Louis VI. After Philip died, the king banned pigs from wandering freely through the streets. Medieval safety laws were wonderfully efficient. First, a pig kills the heir to the throne. Then the government discovers traffic regulation. Countess Cornelia Bandy's death was stranger. In March of 1731, she went to bed after rubbing brandy over her body, a remedy she used for pain. An oil lamp was burning nearby. The next morning, her maid found a pile of ashes on the floor, along with parts of her legs, fingers, and skull. The bed and most of the furniture remained largely undamaged. Later, writers treated the case as possible, spontaneous human combustion, though the exact cause remains uncertain. It looked less like a bedroom accident, and more like someone had tested an 18th century laser weapon. Finally, Emperor Humayun spent about 15 years fighting to regain his empire. Only months after returning to power, he walked down the steep stairs of his library carrying books. When he heard the call to prayer, he attempted to kneel immediately. His foot caught in his robe, and he fell down the stairs, striking his head. He died 3 days later. Humayun defeated armies, exile, political enemies, and years of chaos. Then gravity entered the chat. A wrong turn, a falling cow, a street pig, a tram, a mysterious fire, and one badly timed prayer. That actually happened, proving that sometimes history does not need a villain. It just needs terrible timing and absolutely no safety regulations. So what did we learn? A man survived Niagara Falls but lost to an orange peel. A playwright avoided buildings because of a prophecy, then got taken out by an airborne tortoise. More than 100 lifeguards attended a party celebrating 0 drownings, and somehow somebody drowned. And one driver made a wrong turn so disastrous that history teachers are still explaining the consequences. These crazy historical facts prove that weird history is not always about kings, wars, and heroic speeches. Sometimes it is about scarves, pigs, stairs, delayed fish, and cows entering bedrooms from the ceiling. The lesson is simple. You can survive danger, defeat your enemies, and plan everything perfectly. But the universe may still throw fruit waste at your feet. If you enjoy stories so ridiculous you have to say, "No way, that actually happened," hit the subscribe button, because history is already absurd. We might as well laugh before a tortoise falls out of the sky. Thanks for watching.